So I think the difference between managing an ethics and compliance program in a larger organization versus a smaller organization is that you just have a much broader audience. And where it differs is when you go from just US to global. So I think in smaller, you're going to tend to be more of a US, not be in as many countries. When you become larger, it's generally you are global, and that's when it becomes much more complicated. But the simplest way to address that complication is, again, you make sure that you have a code of conduct and that it's written at a very high level. It doesn't speak specifically to a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or that law or the UK Bribery Act, because in the meantime, you know, Brazil's changing their corruption law and Canada's changing theirs. It's that you basically prohibit bribery, you prohibit these things, you refer to global policy where you can, and then you direct them to local policy or processes. The other thing that I think is important is that you have enough ethics and compliance managers, and that's a whole other conversation because many of us will tell you there aren't enough of us within our organization. But for example, at Bunge, what I really like is that there's a senior manager in every region. So we have those boots on the ground. And then depending on how many employees we have or the number of cases we manage from the hotline, we have managers then reporting to the senior managers. I keep up to date on the laws and regulations, and as you know, it's a constant changing landscape by being involved in things like the ACFE and the SCCE, which is the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. And you know, from those two organizations, as well as reading lots of materials, you know, subscribing to all kinds of blogs, etc. That's how I stay current. And the nice thing about the ACFE and the SCCE is when you're certified with either of those organizations, you have to have the continuing education, which I think is so important because many of us are falling into the field of ethics and compliance, and that to me, it retains the integrity of the profession. So how you deal with the different customs, you know, country customs, from an ethics and compliance perspective, it goes back even a little bit to the business. You have to know what they are. So I have spent time in Mexico. I've spent time with some of our employees, and I will say the people in Mexico have so much pride and loyalty, and in Mexico, a big part of our business is milling wheat. And so, you know, I spent time there at one of the mills, and you know, they baked bread for me and their pride, and they also talked about customs, and specifically, I'm not going to get it right, but around Halloween or some of even the religious holidays, and how important bread is, which is obviously a big part of our business, the flour, to their country. So I think you have to first take the time to learn and understand them. And then from there, you can recognize how you're going to implement your program. And so in Mexico, I recognize that loyalty and that pride. And when I'm training, again, it doesn't go to thou shall. It's like, you can do this, you know, and you already have that sense of loyalty. And so you know you're going to get the company loyalty. One of the things I really strive for, and look, I'm a girl from the Midwest, and people in the Midwest tend to stay in the Midwest. But you cannot have a US-centric program. You have got to be open-minded and recognize that what's important to people in other countries is as important to them as what's important to you based on maybe some of the customs in your country. And so I think you have to keep an open mind. And if you can do that, and you don't become so US-centric, the employees will become much more engaged and receptive of whatever it is that you're trying to implement or ask of them.